Hello, this is Wenceslao Vial, doctor and priest, professor of psychology and spiritual life in the University of the Holy Cross in Rome. Thank you very much for inviting me. I would like to briefly speak about burnout as a form of depression in pastoral or ministerial work. As you know, the latest edition of the International Classification of Diseases has included burnout as an occupational phenomenon, but not as a medical diagnosis. Let's go for a while to the time of Jesus living on earth. The disciples of our Lord were happy to give themselves for their master, but they needed to rest. Jesus says to those who follow them, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." We can summarize in a few words how we will tackle the subject we are about to discuss. The antidote for fatigue and lethargy in ministerial work is to go to Jesus, to rest in the one who gives the mission, the source of peace and serenity. This will be the outline of the session. We will see the form of presentation, the people most at risk of burnout, and at the end we will say something about preventing burnout. Burnout is an unhealthy aftermath of a prolonged stress at work. Burnout literally means to be burned, and it used to be identified with a mental fatigue or surmenage. Like so many other psychological problems, it can be seen from a distance, as it were a brewing storm coming. The very person who is at risk of burnout can perceive the warning signs inside himself or herself, especially in the greater frequency of negative emotions, which are contagious or attract each other, such as anger, feelings of frustration, sadness, and discouragement. Herbert Freudenberger, an American psychologist born in Germany, gave a more precise description in 1974. He characterized burnout as a type of professional stress evidenced by fatigue caused by unattainable expectations. He was the first to use the term in medicine. Freudenberger worked in a clinic for drug addicts and observed that some volunteers, after a year, began losing energy and experiencing physical and psychological fatigue and symptoms of anxiety and depression, which led him to affirm, "These people look, act, and seem depressed." In modern society, there is an increase in burnout, and some consider it an epidemic. Byung-Chul Han, a philosopher of Korean origin, points out that one of the reasons why there is an increase in depression and similar illness today is the fact of thinking, saying, and acting as if everything were possible. According to Han, we are in a burnout society in which the idea of the immune system has been set aside. When there is no immune system, there is no reaction against threat or harm. All changes are differences, or differences are considered good. A society that is fixated on performance, perks, or profits produces depressed and failed people. For this reason, Han affirms activism and increase of profits lead to a heart attack of the soul. In the life of a priest, there are also several challenges that need to be properly understood and resolved. One of the latest documents of the Catholic Church on priestly formation lists 6 points: the experience of one's own weakness, the risk of thinking of oneself simply as a dispenser of sacred things, the challenge of contemporary culture, the allure of power and riches, the challenge of celibacy and total dedication to one's own ministry. Each one of these aspects should be a reason for frequent examination so as to develop one's vocation and to avert the risk of burnout or suffering a heart attack of the soul. Let's see now the first point, the form of presentation of burnout. The trigger for burnout is stress. The concept is borrowed from engineering principles and refers to the fatigue observed in some strong materials such as iron, which can break after use when it has been subject to prolonged stress. To understand how this disease develops, let us look at the way 3 persons who suffered burnout recount their experience. As we read in the first pages of one of the books on the subject, Burnout, the Cost of Caring, by Dr. Christina Maslach. First one, Carol is a social worker, describes her experience by comparing herself to a kettle full of water left on the fire. After a while, when the water has evaporated, she says she becomes empty and continues to burn at the risk of breaking. Then Jim, a teacher, compared himself to a battery. At first, students take a lot of energy from it, and it must be recharged. This task is more difficult every day, and the recharging lasts longer, as happens with telephone batteries. In the end, the battery must be replaced because it's exhausted. Finally, Jane is a nurse who has to take care of many suffering people every day. She thinks she is like an electric cable carrying electricity. There are so many connections that the electric circuit is overloaded and the cable burns. We discover here 3 fundamental signs: the sensation of emptiness, the exhaustion, and overloaded. Burnout develops slowly and progressively. Cracks appear little by little and get worse with time. For this reason, it may not be recognized until it's serious. Dr. Maslach identifies 3 components or stages: emotional exhaustion as an individual response to stress. It's produced by the sustained workload. We can say, as an example, the priest or pastor who is very dedicated to all those who have some material or spiritual need. At this point, the person thinks that he can no longer give himself to others, that he already does too much. Indifference toward those who suffer sets in and drains his capacity for compassion. Second step, depersonalization or cynicism, a negative reaction towards others and towards work ensues. There is continuous mistrust in others and their motives, and the person avoids those who seek his help. Patients, for example, seeing them grudgingly and coldly. The last one, poor personal performance at work or ineffectiveness. In this last stage, there is a negative assessment of one's own performance. Frustration leads to apathy, and the logical consequence of the situation created and the attitude toward it will be a feeling of inadequacy. It's common to think, for example, I'm not cut out for this kind of work. Some decide to change jobs or to break with the commitments they have made, the vocation, perhaps. Various factors can cause a burnout. Symptoms may begin after a period of unrealistic enthusiasm due to certain expectations that have no foundation in reality. In some way, is related to the desire to prove that one is capable of carrying out a certain task. Therefore, people work hard and may become obsessive, leaving behind other activities and neglecting family, friends, rest, or a life of prayer. The difference between burnout and the simple fact of being tired of work is that after a hard and stressful job, which is tiring but full of meaning, the person is usually happy. One finds something attractive and enjoyable about the work because it's meaningful, and experiences satisfaction and joy in seeing the fruits. In burnout, there is a feeling of failure and disgust. The priest can experience this kind of sadness being so close to limitations and suffering, without succeeding in changing these situations. Let us now look at the group of people most at risk of burnout, our second topic. Since the concept of burnout appeared in the 1970s, it was seen that it can afflict anyone who is dedicated to helping those who suffer or have difficulties. The most common risk factor is that of being in contact with different problems and needs and becoming too emotionally involved in them. Not only overload, but also the lack of meaningful work or lack of empathy of bosses or colleagues can lead to exhaustion. Burnout was first observed among nurses. Today, it's seen in many service professions, doctors, especially in intensive care units, psychologists, social workers, policemen, teachers, priests. It can be seen in both paid workers and volunteers. Several articles speak of the increase of pathology among the millennials, which is aggravated by an excessive desire to compete and outdo oneself, instilled many times by parents and by the excessive competitiveness that social networks incite. Millennials respond worse than the previous generations to emotional fatigue. There has also been an increase in the number of cases in priests. A study carried out in an Italian diocese a few years ago describes the results of a questionnaire. In summary, 2 out of 5 priests showed signs of burnout, and 2/3 of priests aged 25 to 29 years fell into one of the risk categories. Burnout has been described as a disease of self-giving or syndrome of the disappointed Good Samaritan. The individual characteristics that can lead to this type of pathology are related to some dangerous personality traits. The most frequent are perfectionism, low self-esteem, low tolerance for frustration, insecurity, egocentrism, and difficulties in interpersonal relationships. It usually affects those who get very tired at work because they usually do not approach their work with order and moderation. It can arise in those who are experiencing such things as behavioral alteration, difficulty sleeping, addictions, affective losses, or diminution of confidence and identity. A wrong motivation, seeking success and money instead of service, can also be a trigger or detonator of the pathological process. We have reached the third and last point. How to prevent burnout? The austere and simple life, built on solid foundations and not in sand, will be the best prevention of pathological exhaustion. The objective of preventing and solving the problem encompasses 2 levels: the subject and the institution in which the person works. The first years of the priestly ministry call for special attention, since the risk in that period is greater. It's possible to remove the symptoms and overcome burnout by putting into practice an opposite attitude: engagement. Engagement counteracts exhaustion, cynicism, and inefficiency. One of the meanings of this word is a promise or commitment to marry. This coincidence is useful because the bride and groom seek to ensure that the love between them does not fail, which is important to avoid wear and tear. In the same way, a job done with love, which is maintained, prevents burnout. Engagement, so doing the pastoral work out of love, has three characteristics: increasing energy, achieving more participation, and increasing efficiency. On a personal level, it's necessary to promote hope and the awareness of being children of God, optimism, taking distance from situations and from our own emotions, re-evaluating the situation from time to time, to have rewarding activities, and try to think more and more in others. Dangerous traits should be identified and addressed as soon as they are detected. After determining what the expectations are, it's important to try to correct the extremes. Either very low, close to zero, I will never convert anyone, I am not good at this, or very high and unrealistic. Excessively high expectations or unrealistic greatness sooner or later lead to ruin. Low expectations, on the other hand, destroy initiative or paralyze action, which translates into a decrease in self-esteem. About pastoral or ministerial work, we mention 6 challenges confronting priests. Finding remedies for each of them is important to carrying out a fruitful ministry. The document on the gift of the priestly vocation proposes 6 measures to overcome them. The first solution is to promote fraternal meetings, since we are called to live in relationship with others. Then, spiritual direction or accompaniment and confession, spiritual exercises, taking meals together, living a life in common, and joining priestly association. Some causes of the exhaustion in priests, which can be remedied if discovered on time, and are lack of interior life, overwork, the impression of offering a product that is out of fashion, stress in coping with unforeseen situations, lack of gratitude or recognition for priests of today, tension in institutions, the weight of decisions, excessive insistence on self-giving during the years of formation. Therefore, in order to prevent burnout in any person, we need to keep in mind physiological aspects such as sleeping and resting properly, and spiritual aspects, which I would summarize as forming a good character through virtue and in virtue, coherence or consistency and unity of life, adequacy of expectations, seeing God at work, having order also in charity, and a project or plan of life. These notes lead to finding meaning in the work and promote resilience or the ability to bounce back from any psychological wound. To prevent burnout, we especially need periods of meditation and contemplation. Pascal's phrase is noteworthy when he speaks of the misery of a man without God who seeks to distract himself or to divert himself with many things that prevent him from focusing on what is most important and from knowing the reality of his limited condition. Wrote Pascal, "I have discovered that all the misfortune of men comes from one thing: they cannot sit alone in a room and pray. All personal preventive measures will be more effective if they are accompanied by changes at the institutional level. There are 6 areas of the person-institution relationship that deserve special attention according to Dr. Maslach. Do not overburden workers and take care of their welfare. Training and reassurance. Provide a sufficient number of rewards. Distribute jobs well. Be fair with everyone. Confront the values of each person and avoid conflicts. It's a matter of achieving a suitable work environment. With good preparation, stress levels decrease, communication improves, and the sense of mission is enhanced, leading to greater human and supernatural effectiveness. I will finish the presentation with some conclusions. The first one could be to recognize the alarms, remembering that the first alarm is a negative emotionality, fear, sadness, hopelessness, etc. Then, to grow in responsibility before someone, to answer to someone, and to carry the weight of one's own decisions, the need of meaning and self-esteem, and to take care of the balance of an active and contemplative life, work and prayer, disconnecting from the excess of external stimuli, also from the internet, favors connecting with others and with God. It's in silence that we listen to the Creator. I would like to end with a Latin phrase frequently used in sundials: sine sole silio. Without sun I shut up. Thus, only with a clear meaning in pastoral work or in any profession is it possible to work with joy and help others. Thank you very much for your attention.